Welcome to Consciousness on Tap. Thank you for tuning in. Here at Consciousness on Tap, I provide you with the tools to tap in and navigate the spirit world. Here you will learn how to communicate with your guides, raise your vibration, and open up the channel to live your highest self.
This computer, yes. All right. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi.
Welcome to Consciousness on Tap. I'm super excited to have you on this. Finally, it took a little while to get scheduling, but we did it, and I'm happy to have you, Lindsay Scharmyn. I just heard about your interesting middle name, last name, and how you got it. How are you doing?
I'm very good. It is awesome to be here. I know it took a little while and, we had some snafus, but I'm glad we're finally doing it. And I always feel like things happen in like perfect time for the perfect reason. So I'm sure this is just like everything else in that way. But yeah, it is weird. My people think it's hard for people to know like what's going on with my name because I have Lindsay Scharmyn is my screen name. My pen name under which I write is Corey Scharmyn. And then
that screws me up with your email because I always try to type in your like Rogue Ways or Lindsay, your Scharmyn or whatever, and nothing comes up.
I really need to like streamline this somehow and figure it out. So, because before I ever did the show and had like a screen name, which came from a weird scenario anyways, I had my books and I wrote under a pen name because I'm a teacher. And if you publish under your real name and anyone anywhere finds a problem with it, then all of a sudden you're under fire in your job because you're not supposed to have thoughts and individuality as a teacher. You're supposed to be a perfect angelic light of pure goodness as society sees that, through society's lens. And if you go
as
outside
long as you're
of that,
like obese and unhealthy.
yeah. You're obese, you're unhealthy, and you're very, very like democratic and leftist in your political stance, then you're cool. Anything else,
don't like children.
yeah, and you hate children and yourself.
You're high.
Yeah. So I had to hide that. And I became Corey Scharmyn, which is a name I developed for Final Fantasy VII when I was like 14. I just like shoved a bunch of like buttons into the system and QUOR came out and I was like Core. And I was like Corey and I added an RI. So it became my favorite character in the game. And that name, I was like, that's a cool way to spell Corey. I'll take it. Like, and then later I did political work and we weren't supposed to use our real names because that's dangerous. And so I was Corey in my political work. So I was Corey Scharmyn when I started my pen name. And then on Facebook and Twitter and these places, I was Lindsay Scharmyn instead of Lindsay Brown because I didn't want my students to be able to find me because all they want is to find you online, find all your pictures, like know who you are outside of school. And it's just
cigarettes.
Yes. And it's like super dangerous also because if they find anything and they tell their parents and your parents get angry and now you have a problem again. So I was Lindsay Scharmyn online, Corey Scharmyn in my books, and Corey in my political world before I left all that behind. And so it's all just this like mishmash of names for various reasons. And it gets kind of confusing, but I'm trying to figure out.
I think maybe you were like a spy in a past life or something, and you've got all of these like identities that really are like low level, like all have to do with like social media and stuff.
And none of them are very serious either, because people are like, oh, so your real name's Lindsay Brown, huh? You're trying to hide. I'm like, I've never been trying to hide except from, parents and like people who would be angry about me as a teacher. And now that I'm not teaching, like I don't care at all.
Let it all out.
Right.
Well, maybe you should just go by Lindsay Scharmyn Brown and just let it shine,
Yeah. But then I'd have to change my books because they've all been published for however many years under the pen name too. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. People will figure it out. I think it's cool. It's like, I have a lot of similarities, I feel like, as far as like business names. I remember, I was trying to see for some reason for a short period of time if like Google could help me find my website like super easy, and they did some sort of analogy or some data work on me and found that like basically my shit's just like really random all over the place and doesn't match anywhere, and that I have too many names and that it would cost like $1,500 for them to figure it out. And I was like, I just feel like it's, yeah, I was like, I think that's really dumb, one. And two, I was like, I just think that people want to find me, they'll find me. That's how I feel now. Like, whatever.
Yeah, I'm similar. I'm like, that I bet there's some like purpose to this, that like less exposure until like the right time or something is probably a really good thing, either for my ego or for like, just the way that energy works in the universe, and that it's all kind of just like happening as it should. So I don't worry too much about it, but I have people who are very confused. They're like, so what is your site and why are you Corey and Scharmyn and like what's going on? And I'm like, I'm sorry, maybe it's good, maybe having a little maze for people to figure out is like more mysterious or something.
Yeah, keep them guessing, right? And I think just when they figure it out, just fucking change it again. Be like, oh, change my name again.
Yep, now I'm George.
LSD. I'm a corporation now.
I used to really want to marry a man with a last name that started with D so I could be LSD. That was like my fantasy. Because my sister is KGB and it's like Killer Green Bud.
Yeah.
And some more secret agency
and
stuff.
Some dark stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like your sister got a great deal on just about everything.
I know. She got the good name. She's the middle child. Like.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. Well, good. I'm excited about this. It's going to be tons of fun. You have Rogue Ways too. That's another avenue, which is your podcast. I've listened to your podcast. It's super awesome. Very well done. You've got really cool guests. And your topics, I like the range. I kind of feel like there's a lot of similarities. It's not kind of how we do it here on Consciousness on Tap. When I say we, I mean like me and all my personalities is just
I say the same
letting it flow, just like letting a dialogue flow and just not really having it be a very structured way. But I'm very happy to, just be totally honest. If there's something off base you don't want to talk about, we'll just shift it. I have no agenda.
Yeah, I'm pretty open. There's nothing that I don't talk about or won't talk about or don't want to share. There's nothing that I'm hiding basically, and there's nothing that makes me sort of uncomfortable. And on my own show, Rogue Ways, I've talked about pretty much everything. I mean, there's a few things I haven't necessarily let out of the bag, but in general, I'm kind of an open book in that way. So I'm totally good. But thank you. Yeah, Rogue Ways is fun. We're very similar, I think, you and I, in that way, that we don't really have like a structure. We have an intention, and that's clear, and that's pure, but we don't have just this like structure. And I sometimes get guests who really want like a list of questions ahead of time, and we're going to stick to those questions. And I'm always like, oh, wow, that's like the opposite of how I do anything. Yeah, I actually have a list of questions just so I can get it clear in my head. And then I almost never use them. They're just sort of there, like, but I like that. I like that just sort of flowing, because it allows for the spontaneous to come through, and things that you wouldn't have intended can be some of the best places that you end up, right? So I really like that flowing style.
Good. I think we're going to get along just fine.
Yes.
So one of the things, I mean, there's so many topics that we could choose from. I mean, I was like, we should just have a podcast and we could just dork out about how similar our names are, and that's weird.
Yeah.
And all the other, into spirituality, about that podcast, blah, 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 blah. But I'm more interested in hearing about you, because I've heard snippets about, just hearing you on different podcasts, and they really resonate with me. They're very similar stories, which is also very bizarre, but I don't understand really your timeline. And I would like to kind of hear, just how this all evolved, like how long you've had your podcast, how long, like it was great when you were talking. I think you were on Tinfoil Hats with the channeling, which was super, that was a killer episode. But what I appreciated is all your information about like being in the school system and being a teacher. We're also similar. Was never a teacher, but I've been, my background is social work. So I was in social work for like 8 years and thought I was going to go that direction and going to school for that, and found out that it was just really a toxic environment that was just going to kind of stay in a box that I didn't want to be in.
Yeah.
And so there's just so many parallels, and I just really appreciated it. It actually inspired me because I'm homeschooling. Me and my boyfriend are homeschooling, like totally off grid, 3 kids. And my whole idea of education, not that I was ever into it. I mean, I was pretty much checked out of school at 5th grade. I was like, this is a joke.
Yeah.
But as a homeschooling parent, you start to have to take on this other responsibility of feeling like, oh, you need to I feel like you need to learn how to spell, and then you need to learn math, and and feeling like I'm either not doing enough or doing too much and being too strict and not allowing creative flow. So that's been this like process that we've been going through over the last year. And after I listened to you, which I've been sort of slowly progressing of just being like, fuck paperwork, we're going outside. We took the kids to Mexico for a month. We'll go to the beach any day that it's sunny. We talk about conspiracy theory, well, truth, I should say, about, things that are going on and critical thinking. And so I guess the more like comfortable I am of letting go of what learning really means, and having my heart connected to that, and not feeling like, oh, I should. It feels really great. And I just think that after listening to you about channeling and the education system, I was like, fuck yeah, that was just confirmation that creativity and imagination is really how you do it. That, but as a parent, I feel like there's also this like obligation of being like, well, did you get this paperwork done, and how much did you get done? And just, it has to be shown calculated. And seeing in that how that's applied to our lives in so many ways of the shouldn'ts, and just doing as far as like busy work and showing progress. I am not even into that really. And so it's just like, just layers of letting go. So I super appreciated listening to you. So I'm happy really to have you on the show and to hear really your story of this progression, of how you sort of came to probably always identify that the system is weird and that life is weird and that we're sort of these like, everyone's just kind of trying to figure it out. So I'm just going to give the floor to you. So go for it.
I love that description of your own path to homeschooling or being, the understandings you're developing within homeschooling. I'm always happy to hear that people are homeschooling because the system is so toxic and horrible that literally anything outside of the system is much, much better than whatever the system's going to do. And it's one of my like passions to really encourage parents or people who guide young children to understand just how toxic and horrible that system is, and just how easy, I don't know if I want to say easy, but I think a lot easier than people think, at least, to do homeschooling and to do it well. And that your child, your children, your students, they're going to thrive if you give them anything at all. It's just really like people don't understand that in school, what you described, the reading and the math, the basic math and the learning how to read, that's really, I mean, when you get down to it, those are the 2 skills you need. When we were talking about way back in the day, that made you educated if you knew how to read and write and do simple math. And so now we have all of these layers on it. We're like, well, you need to know calculus and you need to know like, physics, and like, I don't know about you, but I did all those advanced courses and I don't remember them because I've never used them. The concepts of them, the conceptual understandings, those are fascinating, and anyone can touch on those. You can incorporate those even with tiny children, the conceptualizations of really cool aspects of physics or calculus or any of that stuff, and they don't have to memorize it and know how to calculate it in order to get that beauty from those, areas of learning. And so even that is something you can give to your children without worrying about like, are they doing calculus correct? Who cares?
How much paper did you get done?
Yeah. And if your child is someone who's going to be interested in math and do calculus and go into like physics and those types of things, which are usually the areas where most parents are feeling the least, secure and confident in, there are tons of resources for them. If they go into that area, it's because they love it. If they love it, they're going to learn it with or without you. And then they can go that direction. Like, you don't even have to necessarily be a part of that, and accept in as much as that you support it and help them find the materials and resources they need in order to do it, and possibly find the type of resources, because some kids learn best with lectures and some kids learn best with like immersive projects, and like I think we all learn in all of those ways, but it's just various times various types of those resources can be handy. But that's one thing I really want to encourage parents to understand. And also just that you you really don't, I say this all the time, but you really don't realize how little learning happens in school. The kids are there for 7.5 hours a day. And people have studied it and actually tallied like how many minutes are these children, and they'd pick a high
transition. It's all transition. Yes.
And it's meant to make you disconnected and
fragmented.
Yep. And not able to create these holistic sort of ideas. You don't get that there. It's really, it comes down to like maybe 2 hours of the day.
Yeah,
or less.
That's exactly well, and it's funny. That's what I'm saying. Like, I know that my heart knew that
because you lived it.
There's this like critical part of my brain that's always like, well, you're not doing enough. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And really letting all that just fucking be like, that's your own shit, and just let that dissipate. I mean, the other day, the three of them made a Beanie Boo video that they want to post on YouTube, and they had to like make a poster for it and like write out this kind of script. And so it's just a lot more. Yeah. And I'm like, there's like 2 9-year-olds and 11-year-old, like, do that. That's awesome. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I've known school was fucked. Like I said, I think once we stopped coloring and being kind, like really being kind, and concerned about our well-being and emotions, I was just, I was checked out, and meant to feel like some of the students that you talked about on the channeling, like I was in those the groups of kids that were always sent out to the hall, or always seen as like problems or not smart, and and a lot of that was just, I had so much anxiety in school, the lighting, the way people acted. It's like I had a whole life going on at home that was also really traumatic and dysfunctional. And so then going into like a school setting where I was supposed to be like concerned about my hair and concerned about like, I was always like, really like, I don't know what anybody's talking about. I don't understand what's going on.
None of this makes any sense.
I just want to go get a book on like, witchcraft and go sit in the corner and be weird, which, and things like really interested me, like consciousness at a really young age. And I remember like being 11 years old and having this huge, I didn't know at the time, but looking back, like this huge consciousness awareness of the dysfunctionality and disconnection of my parents. I was like sitting in the back seat of a car, and they were driving. My mom was driving, my dad was in the passenger, and I was just sitting there like instantly at a light, and was like, he doesn't know who she is, and she doesn't know who he really is, and they don't know who they really are, and they have no idea like who I am. And my mind literally just went like, blah! Like, and I was just like, and then I think I probably just like ate a sandwich and moved on. But
because you're like, I don't know what to do with any of that information.
Yeah,
it's true though. Yeah, it's so weird. I just had Mark Borax on the show, and he's a soul level astrologer, and he has like the coolest life story and just this really amazing way of interacting with spiritual energies and helping people understand things. He's super cool guy, and maybe you want to have him on Consciousness on Tap. He's super rad. But he was describing that exact same realization, and it was like helping me reflect, because I don't remember a moment like both of you do. You both have these like very specific moments you remember where you realize that. I just remember like feeling it and kind of realizing that it wasn't even just my parents. It was every single adult that I could find, except like a very few. And then I like loved those people. I was like, I want to hang out with them. I want to be around them as often as possible. And I don't even know what it is. I just know that like there's something they have that other adults don't.
They were connected. Yeah, connection.
and you can find this too, I'm sure, in your own life now when you're interacting with children, they just like you and they don't even know why, and they just want to be near you and they want to interact with you. And it's the same sort of thing, I think, where they sense like, okay, that person is still connected. And I like that,
I think it's because you really see them too. Like I had one teacher in junior high, and I was like in the class where all the kids that were all my friends, or we always got sent out in the hall because like during silent reading, I just could not control myself. I would just start laughing. I would think about the weirdest shit. And anytime we were like supposed to be quiet, I would just like start laughing. It's like I have like Tourette's or something. But I think I'm on the spectrum for just about everything out there.
Yeah.
But but I had one teacher for that class for all the like the problem kids. And I remember her telling me that, she was just always really kind, and I think she told me that if I took an IQ test, that it would probably be exceptionally high. Yes. And I think that I took that information, like I was like 12 or 13 when she said that. And I mean, that's helped me with my own children, because if you look at like ADHD and high IQ, high emotional intelligence, or like empaths, it's the same. Like all the same, right? But if you grow up in trauma with all of like unsupportive families or chaos, a lot of moving, disruption, alcoholism, drugs, you name it, just emotional neglect of not being seen, your parents not really seeing you and engaging, I think can create what they call like the spectrum of mental illness. And that's one thing, that's just always been reoccurring in me studying my life over and over and over and over again. And it's, as I've gotten older, I've been a lot more, I guess, comfortable with understanding how that's all developed, and kind of seeing a bigger picture. But that's a long story, but I just really think that it is us being able to really see that child and see the light inside of them, and their eyes will just like light up, and that feeds your soul, and it's really palpable and expansive. I think that's how we understand and know how intelligent that really is that we have inside of us. And so I want to hear about like your process through all of that. Like, it had to have been really difficult, I'd imagine, being in a school system and then having like being very aware of all of that. It's really traumatizing.
It's very traumatizing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the word for it. And I didn't realize for a while just how traumatizing it was. And as a social worker, it's also, or having been a social worker, that it's also traumatizing to watch all your students, all your kids, all your clients going through their own horrendous lives that you can't do anything about. So you get that secondary trauma, but you also have the trauma of just, functioning within the system. And there's all these pressures, from all around, and they're trying to make you be certain ways and do certain things and whatever. I was just so lucky because I knew from a very young age that I was going to be a teacher. And I had decided that because it was like the one thing I could imagine that wasn't doing harm, and that I could possibly help people understand the things I kind of understood intuitively pretty early on, similar to you, right? I was like, this is one thing I can do. I can't do something that harms people, and almost everything does. So like this doesn't. So I'll do that because you have to do something for money. So I went into teaching for that reason with this, and it feels to me like a sacred duty. Like anybody who does this, it should be like the purpose of your existence, and you should know like how valuable it is to be able to mold a young person or help them find themselves, which is really my true goal, right? So I'm going into it with that. And luckily, I just so happened to find like the right educational path that allowed me freedom to actually understand all these different philosophies of education and all of these different like higher level ideas about like, why are we educating, and what, every single thing we do, why are we doing it? How is that going to affect our students for the rest of their lives, beyond just like, oh, here's an English task and here's how you teach social studies, And so I was very blessed in that way. And I think that's exceptionally rare. And I think I would have gotten there anyway, but I'm just lucky that I had that pretty early on in my teaching education.
Was that the school that you went to that you chose that that had that?
Basically, I went to Evergreen State College, which is like a bad word now. But the reason I went to the Evergreen State, it's in Olympia, Washington, and it got famous recently because a teacher there, they basically do this thing that's the day of presence and day of absence. And when I was there, it was literally just the day of presence is a day that I might be getting this backwards, so don't hold me to it. But the day of presence is a day where all the people of color are there, as they are every day. So I don't really know what the point is. And then the day of, yeah, and I guess you're supposed to notice. And then the day of absence is when all the people of color don't show up. So you can notice how many people of color there are. Whatever, it's cool. I didn't care. I never thought about it, honestly. It happened and I was like, good for you, rock on. And then I kept going. Like it's not important to me. So now it's a really big deal because now they force the white people to not go on the day of presence or something. And so some white people were like, no, like this is my school. I'm going to school.
Racism. This is what you're fighting against. This is what the whole day was supposed to be about.
And it became like violent and like, and they like occupied the school and shut things down. So it got all this attention. And it is exactly that. It is the most liberal sort of like hippie, like free roaming, like radical school you can imagine. Which is why I chose it because I knew that I could design all my own classes. So I went there, I would take a class, I would get to choose which books I read and like what projects I would do and who I would report to. And that teacher that I chose would be the only one evaluating me. They don't give grades, they give written evaluations.
Faces.
I loved it though, because there was like, instead of like, you got an A, they were like, Lindsay kicked ass at this, and this, and she can do these, and here's her skills. And I was like, that's way more appropriate than telling me a letter.
I can understand. My brain can like be like, oh, right, thank you. That's
and anyone else
information
who truly cares about what I can do actually knows now, instead of just guessing. Like, I don't know, was that even a good teacher or a bad teacher, a hard class or an easy class? Like, what does A even mean? So I love
showed up on the day she was supposed to. I say A.
Yeah, right. Everyone's so different. Like, it just made more sense to me. So I really got to be hands-on in my own choice of resources that I was using. And I also had some traditional classes there, just, there are normal classes there too, but the vast majority of my teaching oriented classes were things that I designed myself. So that was really, really helpful for me. And then I went to my master's degree up at Western Washington University in Bellingham at the Woodring College of Education. And it's a super highly competitive program. Like, they select out of thousands of applicants, usually something like 10 people a year. And so I was very blessed to get into that program as well, because they also have a very sort of almost like Montessori approach to educating teachers. And their whole goal, which became my whole goal in educating, was to let people develop their own methods and interests and just be able to rationalize it. I'm going to do this for this reason. Here's this evidence, here's this. So a lot of our courses were about like how to evaluate scientific papers and that kind of, which was super helpful to me on all levels. But also our ability to say like, well, I want to do it this way. So I'm going to figure out like, have other people done it this way? Is there evidence to support that that's a good way of doing things? Why do I want to do it this way? And I think that's way more helpful than being like, here's how you design a lesson and here's how you like. So I really loved that as well. And so I had a pretty non-traditional, very unique education in my own teacher education too. So by the time I got to teaching, I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly why I'm doing it. The curriculum is almost like a side component that's the least important. The most important thing is that here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, and I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly what I would love to see in my relationship to my students and in their progress, and then also how to get them there. And so my first principal, such a badass. I love her so much. She's one of the few women leaders that I've had in an educational setting, and she's also the most intelligent and present. And she was sort of my mentor for my first year, and I was out on a Native American reservation in the middle of nowhere, and 100% of my students were living in poverty, 100% of them were Native American, and 100% of them had pretty traumatic lives. And so it was very, very stressful. It was like trial by fire. But she came to me in my first month, and she said, you're better than most fifth year teachers that I know, and I don't understand why, but it's really, really incredible to watch you like work your first year. She's like, have you taught before? I was like, no, I mean, I've worked with kids, but I've never had my own classroom before. And she's like, yeah, most teachers quit after 5 years. So I'm just saying, like, you're better than most teachers. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, this is my first year teaching. So I felt really confident, you know, and that I was sort of like doing it right because I respected her so
Yeah.
much. And then I just went about teaching in various places in the world, and public and private. And I've
Can I
taught
ask you really
yeah.
quick? I don't want to interrupt you because this is it's awesome, but what age group of kids do you primarily work with? Are you kind of like all over the spectrum?
No, I went for middle school. It was my ideal because that's when I think, you know, you and I both and most people are kind of like, oh, this is what the world is like. And they
Yeah.
either like give up because no one was there to encourage them, or they like, you know, go into the system because that's the easiest way. And so I wanted to be there for that, to like help them be like, no, there's so many ways and you're awesome exactly how you are. And like, you know,
Yeah,
so I
that
loved
is a great age.
I love middle school so much. It's my favorite. And they're crazy and they're wild and they're still like
They're
not
like
too
all
cool.
comedians. You have like
Yeah.
30 comedians in your classroom, you know, at all
Yeah.
times. Just like,
It's
I love it.
never dull. It's always exciting. And that's another thing I need in any like job that I'm doing. It's like I can't just do the same thing every day. I need like
Yeah, that sounds
change.
horrible.
So yeah, and I also ended up doing a lot of high school because your certification is from 6 through 12. So, you know, when you get a job somewhere, they put you where they want you basically. So I ended up doing a lot of high school, which I learned to love a lot too, because they're also at this critical shift, you know, where they're like, okay, well now I'm all of a sudden going to be an adult. What does that mean? And like, what am I going to do? And like, who am I going into the like adult world? And it's another critical age. It's not as much my favorite, but I also really love it. So I've definitely done both. And yeah, that was my whole philosophy, is like, I'm really only here to help you understand yourself and to feel like you have an adult you can trust and believe in, who believes and trusts you, and like have that experience of just knowing that you're exactly as you should be and where you should be, and that it's all good. You know, and so that was my goal. But it's very traumatizing because the rest of the world finds a million reasons to hate me for whatever reason. And a lot of times the feedback was, you know, basically, in other words, besides these, but this was the meaning of it, was, you're making us all look bad. And the other feedback I got from people who didn't like me was that I taught wrong. I was not doing it right.
You look
And
like you're
that
having fun and like engaging with the kids, and that just
looks
seems
like
really
looks like the kids I've judged as horrible and bad are doing well in your class. So you must be doing something wrong. You
Yeah.
must be like cheating in some way, or like letting them get away with things. And I'm like,
Favoritism. No, I can relate with that. Even I worked at a youth facility. It's called the Johnson Youth Center in Juneau, Alaska, and I just kind of fell into that job. I was like 20 nothing, and I think they hired me basically because I was confident, and they also needed like a female to like balance out the male fucking vibe ratio because that was like a state job. But it was a treatment detention facility for like troubled youth, and I got shit there because like I would do like art projects with the kids in the detention center because we're just sitting around bored, and it's like if they
yeah,
had free time, they would let them watch television while they all sat in the office. Or, you know, so I was like, fuck, let's turn all these TVs off and like let's do an art project. And I actually got told that I was encouraging them to want to come back to detention, and they need to be like scared straight. And I was like, these guys
it's
are fucking
ridiculous.
afraid of this stupid detention center. Like, yeah. And so it was so backwards of how to deal with like a human that was
Yeah,
traumatized, and that they had already sort of written them off as these like criminals. And I fluctuated because I always felt I wasn't like at the level of confidence, and it also like triggered a lot of my own trauma. And so it was just really bizarre. But I used to teach yoga to them too. Like we would do
awesome.
yoga out in the basketball courts and stuff, and they really liked it, you know. And I got kind of met with the same thing. Like I was either like letting the kids be too close, or I was kind of being more like nurturing instead of military style. And
You're like, but literally the one thing they need is nurturing.
Is
So
nurturing.
yeah, so I'm giving them what they need. Oh yeah, like it's so bad. It's crazy. But people, the people who are giving you and I those messages and reinforcing that, they're just as messed up as
oh yes, for
they're
sure.
more messed up, honestly,
Yes.
than these kids. Because the kids are still like elastic a bit and can sort of like bounce back. And these people have been stuck in this mindset for decades, who knows how long.
Yeah.
And
Oh, for sure.
and
And
they
I could
can't
see all
question
that,
it.
you know? Yeah, you cannot question it. It's very, yeah. So it's like, and it has high burnout rates, just like teachers do, because the system doesn't support creativity. It doesn't support real connection. And so if you're not really connected, you're just in burnout, you know? You're just like, ugh.
And
Like,
they overwork you.
how
They're like,
fucking boring is that?
here's enough work for 3 weeks, and we want you to get it done in half a week. And we're only going to pay you for the half a week, but you need to do 3 weeks worth of work. And you're like, this is very obviously not sustainable and very obviously not effective. But, you know, and everybody's like, oh, teachers need to get paid more. I'm like, I would much rather get paid less and just have less work, honestly.
Yeah.
Don't pay me more. Take away some of the work. It's
Yeah,
not
all the busy work, you know, and a lot of that is probably like another, you know, step in the ladder of like what they want teachers to do to children. It's like they're doing it to their employees, and it's like this continuous fucking, yeah, trickle down of bullshit. You're like, what is this?
It's so weird that people feel like if you're not like producing paperwork, you're not being effective or productive somehow. I'm like, isn't it? You know, I had this thing I called Genius Hour. A lot of people do it and call it Genius Hour too. And it's a period of time where the kids get to choose what they want to learn about and choose how to learn about it. And there's very little, you know, requirements or restrictions. And I had teachers who were like, so you're just letting them do anything? I'm like, yeah. And like, so they're just doing nothing. I'm like, no, you just said it. They're doing something. It's just anything they want. Like, oh, so they just are like playing. You're just letting them play. I'm like, I guess if it's fun for them, yeah. But like, they're still working. If that's what makes you happy as a human to know, then they're still engaged in like productive work or whatever.
Yeah.
They could not handle it. Like they couldn't even imagine it, and therefore they like attacked it. I'm like, look at yourself. Like you're literally just like the person in the cave, you know. And I came in and was like, hey, those are shadows, and you're like trying to shoot me, so I stopped telling you that they're shadows. Like it's ridiculous, but they're little children in adult bodies, you know.
Well, and I think that's really the thing that's missing is this like not evaluation of mental health, but a support of mental health of people in these establishments that are supposed to be, you know, molding either people with trauma. And, you know, if you're a fucking teacher, you're dealing with trauma. You're just not able to talk about it as much, you know, and you're able to like send shit about what kids are going through and not really being able. But how, you know, I just think about that one teacher that actually saw me, and that, I mean, I'm almost 42, and like to this day, that means so much to me. And so I don't think it takes much for people to really affect children's lives, good and bad. And it's really amazing. Like all my teachers, like I had a lot of just like crazy shit teachers, you know, but she stands out and shines over all of them, just because of that kindness that she showed me, you know, and not judgment.
And your high intelligence allows you to pinpoint what it was about her that made that difference to you, you know. But there are so many students I have too that don't understand why. They just are like, I just really like you. You're the best teacher. And I'm like, oh, well, why? You know, and they're just like, I don't know. I just like it here. I just feel, I just soon as like every time I come into your class, I just know everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, this is the highest praise I've ever received in my life. Genuinely. Like that is the best thing I've ever heard, because people remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
They don't remember what you said or did.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, I'm wholeheartedly, I'm like, yeah, we are emotional beings. I mean, that's why it's really difficult to navigate in this life. And like, I do a lot of trauma work with people with like, you know, on the energy spectrum and like spirituality. And that's a lot of what I talk about. It's like, we know we're so intelligent, and you can say one thing, but your energy field and what you are projecting or resonating your frequency is, we are a lot more porous than we're led to believe. We think we're these solid material matter things that are having a singularity existence, and we're like anything but that. And but after, you know, kindergarten, when you're not allowed to color anymore, and like just do art projects all day, we sort of have to like move to this like logical brain. And it's funny, even though I'm totally into creativeness and there's still a part of me doing this homeschool, it's like, well, what did you get done today? I mean, and I'm like, oh, that's coming up for me to let it go, you know? And I listened, because you talked about that Genius Hour. I listened to that on the channeling on Tinfoil Hats, and I actually did that with
Awesome.
my daughter. And it was really funny though, because like, and then I was like, you know, you can tell me about it, you can write about it, you can draw a picture. And she wrote like maybe a paragraph of what she learned, and then she drew this picture for like 3 hours,
That's
you know?
awesome.
And I was like, well, and it's funny because my first instinct, not my first instinct, and maybe my second instinct was like, oh, this is just a little paragraph. And like, you know, but then I'm sitting there like really looking at what she did, and I was like, that's badass. She
And
was
that's the
super
deepest.
into that drawing, you know,
Yeah.
and she remembered more information and put more information in that picture of showing me than she did in the paragraph. And I'm like, well, that's how she learned. She's really fucking creative and super artistic, very verbal. And so, like, you know, writing's just not one of the things that she is super into. So, you know, just find different ways for her to be able to express herself in creative
Well,
ways. So I
we're
loved listening to that show. It was so great.
And if there's anyone listening to this who wants to learn more about it, that's one of the things I do is educational consultation to help people understand how to sort of think about it and do it. But I want to say we're this like obsessed, like just like heavy, excessively obsessed with writing in this society and everything we do. You know, my sister is going to grad school right now, and she called me. I asked her, "How's it going?" You know, and she said, "Well, I just feel like basically grad school is just me writing essays." And I'm like, yeah, that's like
Busy work.
90% of any education. For some reason, we have this idea that if you can't write an essay about it, you didn't learn it, or it's not good enough, or it's not real or something. But so I spend a lot of time helping, you know, parents and teachers understand that verbalizing, if someone can tell you what they learned, that's just as effective, right?
Yeah.
If someone can draw, like you said, what they learned, you know, that's just as effective. If they're, you can tell when someone's engaged in it or when they're not, or when they really did understand or when they didn't. And you just use that to know, like, okay, well, we need to go deeper in this or not, you know, if it's something you feel like they need to get, or whatever, you just give them feedback like, well, I don't really feel like you necessarily like expressed actually what you learned, or so, you know, you can just talk about it. Like, I just think there's so many ways for people to show what they learn. And the important part of that is it's like the end cap on the learning, some sort of summary, right? Because that's how we learn. We engage with something, we go seeking, we look at it, we try to attach it to things we already understood. And then we should be able to look back and see, what did we learn? What did we get out of that?
Right.
And where are we now? And so no matter how you're expressing that, where are we now? That's just the important piece. You can do it any way you want. You don't have to write about it. So writing is a good skill to have, but we just like pound it. And then nobody wants to write anything because they're like, this is horrible. This is all I ever do.
It's not fun. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Our society is really into results, right? It's like, I need results. I need results. It doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter if you were into it. It doesn't matter if it was interesting, changed your life, if you actually cared what.
Yeah.
I just need you to regurgitate this for me so I can measure and see that I did something and I got the results. You know?
Yeah.
And it's so fucking ingrained and indoctrinated into us on multiple levels, because it's not just education, right? And that can apply to just about every single thing. And I think that's the beauty about, you know, really getting into spiritual work, is that once you get into, I think, understanding abstract concepts and how they're all sort of webbed together, I think it can give you a broader perspective of that. You don't even have to look at those things negatively. You can understand, like, maybe they were put there for you to see that they can be broken and bent and change your reality, and be the co-creator and learn how to do that. And maybe all of these like adversities, hoops that we are jumping through or going through, are just these stepping stones of like gathering our empowerment, you know? And, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah, and that's, I think, like, for me, we were talking about, I don't know if we were recording or not, but just even doing spiritual work, that's had to develop with me of these things that were indoctrinated, fears, anxieties, or perceptions, beliefs, programs, and having to have a paradigm shift, have a perspective shift of what that really means, and understanding that my frequency of that belief system is affecting, because it's all quantum, right?
Yeah.
Is affecting what I'm engaged in. And if we were taught that in school, holy shit. And I talk to I talk to my kids about it a lot. They're always like I don't know if they're really like getting it, but sometimes I get confirmation, that I'm like, oh, maybe they do listen to me. But for the most part, they're like, I know, I get it. We're divine, or the world's magic. I get it, But I just think that teaching children, which I think is so awesome. And I want you to continue with your story because you're not a teacher anymore. I got to see how that all played out. But I want to do a whole show just on infinite potential,
Awesome.
and because I feel like I think on every report card I ever got in school does not live up to her potential. I was like,
you're like, oh, gee, I wonder why. I would.
Thanks for the insult.
You're not really letting me. Yeah.
I'm like, I love that they can just write that and be like, that's the result, and you're like, yeah, but I mean, that should be the green light to go and individually try to see that person. And I get it. That system, like you said, it's flooded for you to be so in overwhelm that you don't want to. And that applies to social work, that applies to the medical field, that applies to all aspects of working with humans, and it's just, like, how purposeful is this? How high up does this go? But just to break all that. So you're a teacher, you got this killer, creative way of learning and engaging with the kids. And did you just get to a point where you're like, loved yourself too much to subject yourself to that kind of
That's a really good
adversity?
Yes, that's exactly it, basically. I do want to say really quickly about the report cards is that's another way I was sort of attacked and targeted, is because on my report cards I would always 100% of the time first put something positive, and if I put something negative, it was not negative, it was always just factual. Like, it wasn't judgmental, it was factual. So it was like, you would have a higher grade if you turned in more work.
Right.
Just true. Just in case you were wondering, like, that's true. I don't care. I'm just telling you. And the number of kids that would come in and be like, thank you so much, Miss Brown, for that comment on my report card. And I'd be like, wow, I wonder how many teachers have ever gotten thanked for a comment on a report card, because I always made sure to say something good, even for kids who were failing. And I had teachers, who would hate that. And they'd be like, why are you putting this if it's not true? I'm like, it absolutely is true. If I just say you're a pleasure to have in class, it doesn't matter if you have an A or an F. Like, you're a pleasure to have in class. I love you.
You're funny as shit.
Yeah, you crack me up every day. Like, but yeah, that's definitely, and those are like the pieces of the spiritual that we're trying to come through in this system. And the system is really, really well made in keeping the spiritual out and keeping the positive out. And they think they're not, but they are. And I did, it is hard to be a teacher, period. Like I said, especially my first year, I was working an average of like 80 hours a week or more. And people don't really understand, why, but I don't know about other teachers, but I was never actually even given curriculum like, here, teach this. So I had to literally find it and create it out of scratch, which takes a long time. I had to do it for 5 or 6 classes a day. And then I had to grade everything and record everything and write letters and like communicate with parents and do all this stuff and then keep track of all of that. And it's just like 80 hours a week, and I'm fast. I am really organized and really fast. And that's me. So I can tell you that most teachers aren't doing a very good job because they can't. Not because they're not capable, but because we literally are not given enough time and, the right amount of work to actually do well and do what you're supposed to do. So anyways, that's part of what burns you out. But really it was I can get all the happy, good, refueling energy from like knowing that I'm affecting these children positively. And that only lasts so long, because exactly like you said, I love myself, but if I'm putting myself in these situations where I am constantly abused by my coworkers, I'm constantly targeted, I'm constantly attacked, I'm never accepted, I'm never loved, I'm never being given the message that I'm doing something correctly or well or good. And then I got to the point where my coworkers were literally trying to sabotage me. I had people sneaking into my room and stealing records to make it look like I was not doing a good job or whatever. And
Wow.
yeah, no, it was really like they really wanted me to go.
Well, did you
Um,
think about too, like you're like, how dysfunctional is that? You know,
yes.
how hateful. It's like you're trying to teach these teenagers to be loving and not
Yeah.
fucking smear each other on social media and not, sit and abuse each other while the teachers are doing that. So
To each
hypocritical
other.
to each
Exactly.
other.
And
So
they
hypocritical.
they
And
had
that's a
their
frequency that's palpable, and that goes through the school.
yes. And they would they were literally talking shit about me with students during class. In other classrooms right next to mine, they were talking shit about me. And
Wow.
like so the students started to turn against because this was a school that was very small. It was an alternative school. The teachers there had been there all together for so many years and they were incredibly codependent and dysfunctional. Incredibly codependent and
And that's
dysfunctional. They
really, really, really common.
really sick too, right? So
Yeah.
these kids who are going to there because they're suffering with codependency and abuse and all these things now have these teachers that are, I guess, a little bit healthier than a lot of their parents were because they could hold down a job, but in reality they were not at all. They
Right.
were replacing abuse of substances with abuse of one another and themselves, and like I don't know, it's just very sick. So that and this was also the point in my career where I had finally gotten to the school I wanted because I always wanted to work in alternative schools because that's where my people are. That's where the kids who I like love, not love most, but I love to work with most because I was them, and I
Yeah.
feel most rewarded in that. So I was finally there. And that's when this all got really that I'd always had some attack and some abuse, but it was kind of like, I at least sometimes have an ally or two in a school of hundreds, and so I can get through it. And here all of a sudden, literally every single teacher, the counselor, like everyone was like, this woman needs to get out. She's bad. And I'm like, this
I just
is
want to point out too, like you're working with the highest level of kids that have the highest level of open trauma or, just or fuck the system or whatever. And then you have also like the highest degree of dysfunctionality with the staff.
yes,
How fucked
because
up is that shit?
they're codependent and they seek out
Yeah.
these relationships, but also the district pushes all the teachers who are pretty shitty over to that school because they're like, well, it's the shit students and we'll put the shit teachers there and just get rid of all these problems. Instead of being like, these are the kids that need us the most. Let's put our best and our brightest there and let's make it this really healthy, awesome, helping
Love
them
camp.
transform. Yeah. No, let's not do that. Let's just put all the shittiest things there. Like it was so sad and depressing. So I was like, okay, I mean, I can stay here. I'm making more than I've ever made because I got this stupid national board thing that certified got me extra like money because I'm in this school that's like the worst school or whatever. And all this, and it's the easiest job I've ever
Making a
had.
difference.
Yeah, and I'm making a maybe. And I I have the least amount of students I've ever had. I have the least amount of work I've ever had. So in that way, it's the least stressful. But I'm surrounded by hate and attack like all day, every day. I can't do this anymore. And so it was like the combination of being at where I thought I'd be the happiest combined with like the most attacked I've ever been. And then I was just like, yeah, I can't do it. And it had been years that I had been telling myself like, just a few more years, just like keep helping whoever you can, and finally I realized you can't sacrifice yourself for other people. It's never going to work well for anybody, honestly. And I'm
Well,
not
and that's just
saying,
like that system is never, I shouldn't say never. It's just the continuous wheel,
yeah, it's
you
going to
know,
keep, yeah, no
gonna keep
matter what
turning.
you do, it's going to keep being that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I had to take care of myself and admit that, this was not sustainable and it wasn't healthy for me. And I had a lot of guilt come up because I need to save the kids. Like,
Yeah.
but I just had to let that go and realize I have helped many, and that's cool. That's good. That's beautiful. And now I'm going to go do something else. And it's not like I'm ever not going to bring that energy to people or have that intention, with anything I'm doing. So I'm not abandoning anything or anyone or myself. I'm just transitioning into something else, and I didn't know what that was going to be, and it's just sort of played out to become what it is now. And I have a lot of people in, you know, the Rogue Ways community tell me like, oh, you're still teaching, you're teaching us, like we're your students now, which I really love hearing and appreciate a lot. But I also now have really had more time and gone through my own even deeper healing process than I ever had before, to unveil some of my like deeper spiritual gifts. And now I'm using those in a lot deeper alignment with myself to help other people too, which has been some of the most rewarding things I've ever been able to be involved with, you know? So it really is cool that it's like when I let go of that guilt and I let go of that system and I let go of that, like, I have to do it this way, and just let the universe sort of like, fine, let's do whatever then. You tell me what to do. Like, how can I like still help people, and what am I going to do now? And the universe was like, okay, you're gonna do it like this. I was like, oh, well, that's awesome. Like, you know,
that's creative and fun, like me.
Yeah, right.
You know, I just want to point out too, like while you were talking, it just, you know, the thing that like comes to my mind of, you know, feeling like we've like maybe abandoned the kids, or this guilt, or, you know, defeated or given up. It's almost like, I think I see it as like an energetic, like palpable, like showing them that you love yourself so much that you're not going to stay in that toxic environment. And the thing about people, like I was saying, it's like they might not know that consciously, but subconsciously or on some level, they're going to know that. And, you know, I think that I was just talking about this with my boyfriend. I don't know how we got on the topic this morning of just, I've never like sugarcoated, I guess, things that I say to my own children. And I used to have guilt about that because my son, he's 20, is very cynical. Like, but he's awesome. He's super, super intelligent. Like, he is just like a 2.0 version. And he doesn't have like the emotional fluctuations, at least outwardly, that I have. So he's a lot more like grounded. But you know, I remember one time we were like walking in the store, and he was pretty small, and he was saying something like, he's like, man, I fucking hate Easter. It's just all like consumerism and bullshit, and like just said all this like terrible stuff about Easter. And I was like, oh my God, where did you hear that? And I thought about it, and I was like, oh my God, he's repeating me. I said that to him. Like, I said that at a really young age. And, you know, I just think that we think that we're supposed to sugarcoat, or that lying or being bluntly negative is somehow teaching children. But I love when you're talking about what you wrote on the report card. It was the truth.
Yeah.
And I said this morning, I'm like, I think children can handle the truth. It's so difficult. You know, it's like, I thought in my own childhood, it's like I was always told, like, observing one thing and calling it out for what it was, and then being corrected either by my parents or by other people, like, oh no, that's not what it is. We're just talking. We're not doing that. We weren't fighting, or like everything had to be kind of glossed over or denied. And that really fucks with you as a child, because then you lose your own ability to trust yourself. Yeah. But when you're told the truth as a child, like, you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I get it. And you can be age appropriate and not have to ruin Easter like I did to my poor son, you know, like, because I was just like, you know, gosh, that was so long ago. I had him when I was very young, and I was just like, I had no filter whatsoever. But I think that children and adults, all of us, can handle the truth because it resonates on a vibration that we can actually absorb. You know, it's like our subconscious can be like, oh, okay, I can accept that because I know on a deeper level that is true. Yeah. And I think, I don't know. So I just think even on a subconscious level, those kids felt or knew, yeah, someone that loves and cares about themselves are not going to stay in this sort of environment. So I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
So how long ago was that, by the way? How long?
I think it was 3 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a little
Wow.
while. And I basically and there's a whole synchro mystical aspect of this too, but I basically bought a van, put my bed in it, and drove around the continent, sold my house, left my job, and just drove around North America for a little while. And my goal was to keep doing that for a long time, but I ended up here in Colorado Springs with my soulmate. And so I did it for a while, and then now I'm here, and obviously I was meant to be here. And I still go on trips, in the van. And so I'm still doing that too. But it's just funny how even that I had like a plan, and life was like, yeah, no, I mean, that's cool, but we're going to like do it like this.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's just being open. And I think that, too, I guess I'm always talking about this kind of stuff. I was talking about faith really this morning. It's just like we're always taught, especially in school or by our parents or whatever, that we should or shouldn't, and like these obligations. And then it just builds up resentment. And then we are holding on to this resentment. Then we're coming into relationships with another person that has all this resentment. And and they end up just constantly fighting because this thing that they're working on, they're trying to get from one another of this relief. But it's really, you have to go in and I think be more true to yourself. But we're not taught that. We're taught like, oh yeah, you can be an astronaut, you can be a doctor, you can be all the things that you have to be in debt for the rest of your life, just like unattainable goals.
Right.
It's not like, oh, you should be, you should just, I don't know, go travel the world. Don't worry about money. Don't go to college. Like, not college isn't for everybody. There's multiple ways to learn. Be an independent learner. Start reading about things that you love and learn how to do it. There's no support for that. And so I feel like, the younger that kids understand that you really can do whatever you want and be a co-creator, but on a level that's more real and deeper than what we're sort of taught. And that it's, in a lot of ways, it's just like, it's free and easy and it's the flow, it's like you plan to go on this trip and you're going to go all over the world. And then all of a sudden you end up in this really beautiful place and it's just showing you. And that's, I think, being in faith, and we're not taught to have a lot of faith because when we're lied to as children, going back to that, knowing something on a deep level, on a spiritual, intelligent, conscious, subconscious level, but then being lied to by all of these like outwardly forces. And if you have any sort of trauma, which anybody does that lives on this planet, it's just masked with that truth compass of your own self and having faith in your own self. It kind of like gets dulled down, and it can go. But maybe that's the beauty of it, right? Maybe we just need to go totally rogue, which is the perfect name, so you can find your way back. Because it's like, I do think that all of that adversity and trauma that we have to go through, like I said, it's just like, it's always giving you the opportunity to find out how strong you are and how capable and how much you can be a part of your deep healing process. And when you start to make those choices, the whole world opens up for you and kind of shows you how,
It's
so
absolutely true.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love, I just, after hearing, you on Tinfoil Hat, I was like, I looked up actually Genius curriculum, but then a part of me is like, because like last year, just falling into homeschooling, I immediately, like my son did his last 2 years of high school with homeschool. So I was familiar with homeschool, but I didn't have the patience to sit and, they kind of set parents up for really getting used to being away from their kids. And then when they're around their kids, they're like, oh, I got to help you with this, I got to help you with that. So it's like chore. And all that sort of broke off last year, which is really awesome. And it was a huge wake up of like, I was like, is this what you're fucking learning about in school? Like how much my daughter didn't know. And I, when my son was really young, I would go to his school a lot and volunteer. And I was a paraeducator at his school and super involved. And with my daughter, I hate to say it, like I had a hard time going on field trips because the minute I just walked into her classroom, the way that they talk to kids, I was just like, ugh. And they're like, get your bubble and then put your bubble in your mouth. And we're gonna walk through the hallway in line. It just seemed very like, it's like they're just like setting them up for like prison.
Yeah.
You know?
This is just how to obey.
Yeah,
How to not be yourself and obey.
yeah, and I knew that, but still, I was just locked into this like, well, I drop her off and then I have some free time, and it's just so it's like glorified babysitting. And so when all that got disrupted, and I knew the path that the school system was going to go, like all these Zoom meetings and all, I was just like, I am out. Like we're
Good.
out
Yeah.
100%. I was like, we're going to get books. You're going to learn how like alphabetical order of things, be able to like research, find things in a book. And yeah, so it really changed a lot. And that's obviously going to just keep evolving, and hearing you played a big part, I guess, really on being like, oh man, I'm all about being creative, because last year when I just picked curriculum, I was like, let's just pick this. I don't fucking know. And literally all this last year, I think I looked at that curriculum maybe like a handful of times in the first couple of months, and then I was like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
Like, this is really stupid, and I don't want to learn about this. Like, we did one day where I was showing her, we talked about what society thinks is beautiful in women. And I was showing her, pictures that she sees, like if she gets on her like little iPad or whatever, of things that would pop up of all these women in like makeup and clothes, and then I'll show that same person without any makeup on, and not to show that they're ugly, but to show like that's a fucking illusion, and that's not real beauty. And so we just had this whole day of just talking about just that. And
That's
I think,
awesome.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, man, I wish somebody, I never bought into any of that stuff when I was really young, but you want to look pretty and you want to be, it's just all these mixed messages of what you're supposed to be, right?
Right.
And whether you buck the system or not, I think you're affected by it, and so it was just really, now I'm just like, yeah, it's just going to be pretty much whatever. And I think next year I want to find things that are very artistic. She's super artistic and hands-on and stuff. So thank you. It's what I'm saying. Like, that's
I
a
love that.
long-winded thank you, because it really did. I was like, yeah,
Well,
that's
I
what
think
it's all about.
you're modeling the like flow that you can have in homeschooling too, for anyone who's listening, that like you can go get curriculums, like do whatever makes you happy and comfortable, but you can also never ever have any like curriculum that's set. And I think a lot of people have this idea that they should know, like, well, next week we're going to do this, and the week after that we're going to do this, and here's the year's worth of work, and here's where we're starting, and here's where we're ending up, and it's going to go like that. And again, if that's what works for you and your kids, like, I'm not judging you, I'm just saying you don't have to be like that. You can
I
like wake
can't
up,
be like that. I
yeah,
was like, oh, I hate
and you
this.
could wake up in the morning and be like, well, what's on my mind today is like the weather and how it's changing, and so we're going to talk about weather today. Or like, what are you guys thinking of lately? Like, what do you want to learn about? Let's go find resources on that. And even that, you're modeling to them then how you go about learning and teaching yourself, and so they're learning just in that process itself, so that you can be like as free flow as you want. And that is a beautiful thing too. There's nothing that humans do that can't be learned from. So like, a lot of times too, I'm telling people, just do what you would do in a normal day and have your kids be with you and talk to them about each thing. Like, well, I'm going to set my alarm clock for 6 so that I can wake up in time to do this. This is how I do time management. Like, now I'm going to get in the car. Oh, the car needs like gas and a windshield wipe because that helps us see. And this, you know what I mean? Like, even things we don't think about can like be little lessons. And so I just like, we just need to be so much more free with it and just let go of our expectations of what learning looks like and what, the outcome has to be. The outcome is going to be a thoughtful person who's engaged in the ability to think, reflect, and learn. And that's really all you need. The rest of it is all shit that goes away anyway, because you never use it, remember it,
It's true, yeah. And then also, yeah, being inspired, all through school, I had a really disrupted life, like super disrupted life. I think I went total like 11 different schools. I went to 4 different high schools. And so by the time I graduated, I graduated early. I went to an alternative school actually my last year of high school, and I didn't even want to go to my graduation, but my parents made me. I was like such a punk, I really was a punk, like through and through. But I was also under the impression that I was dumb. Like I was told when I was younger, it was like in my chart or whatever that I had dyslexia, right? And I remember in school, I would be looking at my book and like, I remember like really trippy shit. I think I just was like born on acid or something because the words of on my book would like come up and like swirl around and stuff. But, you know, looking back now, um, I think one, yeah, sure, I'm on a spectrum, but I think two, my brain works differently. And then I was also had a lot of trauma, like a lot of childhood trauma. And I don't know any fucking kid that can have that amount of trauma and then go to school and be like, you know, I guess you can become kind of like a sociopath and be like, I'm going to pour all my energy into like cheerleading and reading, you know, getting good
Yeah.
grades and like, you know, being like, but I never wanted that. I was always like anti-authority. I didn't go to like the people pleasing side of things. You know, I went the opposite direction where I was like, anybody told me anything, I was going to do the complete and total opposite just to be kind of an asshole, you know, and which was really tough. So I had this impression that I was dumb and that I couldn't learn. And then as I got really interested in, you know, like I just read like really weird shit when I was like in junior high and high school is when I got into really weird stuff. Like I don't know, it wasn't really weird, but just more like stuff about consciousness. I was really into abnormal behavior and psychology. I always like wanted to know why people behaved the way that they did because I was always observing like, oh, what are the motivations behind, you know, these actions or what is this like? Because I could sense people's energy and emotions, even though I had like no like no words. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And yeah, so when I got into books is when and like I read a whole book that I was interested in and I was like, I don't have fucking dyslexia. I actually am like a really good reader and I'm actually a really good writer. And I went to this like community college after I graduated and I took like photography and mythology and it was this really cool little like community college that had neat classes and I took a creative writing class and I got really high grades. And I'd never gotten a high grade in my life, you know, ever. I mean, maybe in kindergarten when I was like coloring and stuff like that, or in like art class. But everything else, it was like does not live up to her potential. Like, and so it really, you know, it really gave me a confidence back that I actually am intelligent and the whole fucking system is super fucked. You know, it just really, really is. I mean, even the lighting that you're under, those fluorescent lights, you know, it's like, you know, the flashing and I don't, I contribute a lot of that to just the environment. You know, it's just not an environment of creative thought. It's not an environment to thrive in. It's just an environment to kind of like, don't rock the boat. Don't make me think too hard. I don't want to have to, you know, I don't want to have to like deal with you on an individual level. I just want to kind of like blanket this experience, pass out all this stuff, have you bring it back, and I can get my results, you know, turned in. And I don't want to diss teachers because I know there's a lot of cool teachers, but you know, just in the whole school system is just it's bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, it's super bizarre.
It's bred and created out of a literally psychopathic mindset and social structure. And that is what it reinforces and that's what it rewards. And it also rewards obedience and repetition and regurgitation. It doesn't reward anything else almost ubiquitously. There's a few exceptions. There's a few good teachers here and there, and there's a few types of schools and ways of doing it and just like that happen to have like allowed some sort of flourishing, but it's very rare. And that's one of the biggest crimes of that system is that it tells anybody who's not an obedient regurgitating slave that they're stupid, and they're not. None of them are. There are very rarely people who literally cannot think or cannot acquire knowledge or do something productive with themselves or follow what they love. Very, very few. The rest of us, you know, the rest of these people are just not fitting into that system. And we all know it. We have all these memes that are like, oh, if you judge a fish by how it could climb a tree, like, of course it'll look incapable or whatever. And we know standardized tests are not actually effective in gauging intelligence or ability. And we all know it. And yet we continue doing it because it is the social structure. And there is no other option in this society. that we can see for getting ahead. But like we've both described, there's actually a million things you can do. If you're like, what is your real goal? And what is your real like reason for being here as a human on earth? You know, is it to jump through all those hoops so that you can become this certain high paying job type and then die? I mean, and if it is, cool, like, don't let me stop you. But I was like, you know, no, it's not. My goal being here is literally to like help, you know, heal myself and others as much as possible. How am I going to do that? And here's the ways, you know, and it took a lot of like unraveling through all of those ways to realize there's even better ways to do it that are even more outside of the system. But that's a beautiful process in and of itself. I don't regret it. And I'm, like you were saying earlier, like each of our adversities gives us some sort of strength and ability to understand, and sort of like a key that we take back, you know, that now we have it and we see someone else going through the same thing. We can be like, hey, if you want, I have this key, like take it or leave it, you know. And that's a really beautiful thing too. So I don't regret any of it either. But it's definitely psychopathic. It's definitely, you think about like, what does it take to tell a child that they're stupid or that they're not capable, or to send them that message, you know? And I think that's another thing that a lot of my students loved about my class, is that I always told you what you did good and what you did right and what was awesome about you, whether it had something to do with the lesson or the skill we're learning or not. And I always did that first before I ever told you, you know, just factually what you could do if your goal was to get to blank, right? Whatever that is. If you want to write a paragraph, well, you could do this and this and this. If you don't, I don't care. I'm going to have to give you like a D or whatever, but it doesn't mean anything about you as a person, except that you chose not to write a paragraph in this way. Who cares? That's your choice. You know, your true intelligence and your true worth are not even, I could not calculate them and give you them in a letter anyway. It would take me days to describe. So don't take this personally, you know? And I think that's another message that's really freeing for kids to hear, is like, no teacher is going to be able to do that. And if they think they can, they're the stupid one, not you.
That's awesome. I wish that you were my teacher when I was a kid. I mean, how inspiring would have that have been, you know, just to have that sort of message of that there really is like all the things that you're seeing, all the unmotivation that you have. It's not because you're so like stupid, it's because the system is, and I'm not blaming everything on the system, but you know, is that it just isn't a creative environment to thrive in. You know,
No,
and
you
so
can't.
it's just not sparking that, you know, that thing that we have inside of us that wants to be
Passion.
like, oh yeah, our passion, our joy, you know, higher frequency of, it's just like this mundane, like, and kids that are highly intelligent know that, and they're like, fuck this, I'm not gonna do it.
This shit's stupid. Yeah. And this is the thing about Genius Hour too. The idea of it is that like all the things that someone is interested in, no matter where along the way that they're interested in them, they're feeding their central sort of like purpose and mission anyway. So like if you're just letting a child choose what they want to learn about, they're already naturally heading towards their highest ability and outcome. So why wouldn't you want to encourage that, you know? And why wouldn't you want to help that flourish? Like that's all that. And I'm literally serious. People are like, yeah, well, what if they're into like knives and shit? I'm like, what's wrong with being into knives and shit? Like, who cares what they're into unless it's like something dark and evil, you know, that's harming people.
Right.
I don't care. Like it's a beautiful thing. You can learn about anything, and it will serve your highest purpose if that's what you're into.
Yeah, well, it's all those judgments that people put on shit, you know. They're like, oh, well, if he likes knives, that means that he's going to be a psychopath and use them to kill us. You're like,
yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck? Stop watching TV, man.
You realize people make knives for a living, right? Like, and that it's even an art form. And like, yeah, there's way too many. It's so narrow and it's so judgmental, and it's not supporting thriving on a personal level. And therefore it's not going to support thriving on a mass level either. We're going to keep continuing to create the same system, and by definition a system cannot be creative or flourishing or you know, responsive. Like that's not what a system is. A system is a dead thing for which you can funnel energy into, and it will produce the outcome you want most of the time.
Well, it's funny,
it
and like, yeah, well, and observing that, just being in social work, I always was like, man, they'll take a program that doesn't work, reevaluate that program, pour more money into that program, and then reapply it. You're like, why didn't you just stop doing the fucking program?
Or
The
this.
program doesn't work.
This is a story I love to tell for just how sick the system is. So my students had this thing for their senior project or whatever, and it took all this time and all this energy, and you had to be able to drive yourself around and you had to be able to do all these things. And I was like, requiring this for graduation is really limiting, especially to our children living in poverty, or who just don't have, or who have jobs, or who work on a farm, or like their family home or whatever. They don't have the time and the resources to do this. So it's not equitable. So we need to change it. Like, it's really restrictive to kids, especially kids living in poverty. And everyone was like, oh, you're crazy and stupid. We've been doing this for years. It works fine. And I'm like, well, honestly, we all know that the kids who are poor are actually just lying and cheating in order to just give us this thing. And therefore it's meaningless anyway, because they literally can't do it the right way.
Right.
So let's try to make something actually meaningful to them. And let's do something like Genius Hour, but let's also have time in school to support them actually doing it. And like that makes way more sense on every level. So parents started getting into it. A lot of my students were into it, and we all went to the whatever school board meeting to like present it and like lodge our complaints and say what we wanted instead. And they listened, and they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll do away with that. But we still want something. And I was like, yeah, let's do the thing that I was saying. Like, let's have them be able to choose whatever it is and then do it supported in class with class time and teacher support and teacher and materials that we provide for them and all of that. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll like do a study session on it, like whatever. And when they came back, they had recreated the exact same thing, but with different words, and it looked slightly different. And it was all the same out of school requirements, all of this money you had to spend on it, drive all these things. And I'm like, wow, like we went to all that trouble to tear this down, and you said you understood, and now you just gave us back the exact same thing. Like, they cannot understand any other way to do it except the way they've always done it. Even when they
And
think that
that's
they've
weird
understood.
to me. Like, I like, as much, I guess, as people that think in the box can't wrap their brain around like the way that I think. Like, I really have a very difficult time sometimes in like, oh, like there's people that don't understand like, abstract concepts. There's people that
Yeah.
don't think about things on like multiple levels on multiple timelines and like think. And I really have to be like, oh yeah, people don't think that way. And I'm like, I've always, I guess, been fascinated because by all means, I should have ended up like one of those people, like the family structure that I had, the environment that I grew up in, so I've always, I think that's what got me into like, why was I always very aware, and I mean, we all come in, right, on a spiritual level on different consciousness. And I'm not saying I came in at a super high level of consciousness, but I do think that some people, I guess, are more aware that shit's fucked up. And that's really difficult when you're a kid because, getting into spiritual stuff, like I had, I don't know if I'm going to actually ever produce a book, but I do a lot of writing. And lately, I have just been doing a lot of writing about, I guess, childhood memories and sort of, because it's always been trauma, but even those are coming into a different focus as like my spirituality has grown and evolved, and I've done a lot of healing and letting go and looking at things differently. And I'm not like self-proclaiming myself to be somebody that maybe can do something about it, but I've always been able to see, like, I've always had really like demonic experiences. I used to have really, really fucked up dreams when I was a little kid, like really fucked up dreams. Almost like I'm like, maybe in a past life, like I was like part of some ritual Satan shit. I really don't know, and I don't need to know, but I've just been subjected to a lot of that as a young kid and was very like traumatized by it. And able to sense energy, certainly able to sense like entities, and especially that are on other people or just in an environment. And I don't necessarily always see them like with my eyes, but I have in the past. And I've like one of my first episodes of Spirit Junkie was me talking about like this, I guess, like for lack of a better word, what they call like sleep paralysis, but it was way beyond that. And it happened like 3 nights in a row. And so I don't know why, like, who knows why some of us, you know, part of me, I'm like, well, maybe children, well, a theory, which it's not my theory that I came up with, but that's one component, but I always see things, I'm like, it could be any of those things.
Right.
Could be all of them, could be none of them, who knows? That's kind of the fun of like thinking. But
Yes.
that children that have a lot of trauma, especially that have a lot of generational trauma, alcoholism, I think are susceptible to those entities coming through and torturing them and living in the home because they're like feeding off of the environment, and maybe the parents like have their own demons that are running rampant when they're blacked out or whatever they're going through. And I certainly had a lot of that in my life, and I feel like now that's helped me with my spiritual work. But like the first half of my life was like really dark and caused a lot of like self-abuse and self-harm and things like that, just to cope, you know, with what I was experiencing. And part of me is like, oh, well, maybe I was just like a super empath and could sense that stuff, and you know, and that's why, because I have a theory too that a lot of empaths suffer from mental illness because they're really not tapped into their power. They don't know how to protect themselves. So, you know, and one of those things which you do a lot of, and I'd like to know more about like how that developed and if those things started to develop like while you were teaching, because mine started to develop while I was still in this social work structure. And like I was saying, like the more I guess I was comfortable living with more light in my life, the less I could kind of like be subjected to darkness, like like purposely putting myself into these situations of like it being a dark, you know, forces and stuff, and just being triggered by that trauma. But yeah, and just even my development of like different modalities that I've used and other modalities that people use. I used to be a lot more fearful or judgmental or kind of like, well, I wouldn't fuck around with that kind of stuff. But I think that's because obviously of the things, you know, I never wanted to like have that be invoked, because I do think that you can do that too. And I know you share that because I have heard you talk about that too. And so, yeah, I guess if I had a question, it would be like, you know, did your spiritual work, was that always a part of you and that awareness, and then you just got it like more refined to where you're like, oh, I'm going to learn, I'm going to, you know, really absorb what these are in different modalities. And so you tell me about that kind of stuff.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I know.
I basically everything you described, I'm pretty on par with what you're saying. I definitely had a also very dark and severe trauma throughout my childhood, and so lived in a lot of that darkness. I definitely agree that abuse and drug abuse and, you know, generational sort of trauma and like curses, so to speak, can get that negative entity attachment into your life very quickly and easily. And I also think that people like you and I who came here to overcome that, you know, there's a certain level of entity that's attracted to us to because we have much higher potential to tap into our true power and access that, and therefore we're even higher energy sources, so to speak. So I think it's a combination of like easy pickings and also like knowing like, if I can like really get attached to this person, then like that's like a direct tap into the food, you know. Yeah. So I do think we face sometimes a bit more confrontation with those entities than a lot of people might otherwise encounter. And I've always had like a spiritual connection and component to me, and I unravel it more and more, you know, becomes more and more clear. I can like see the thread all throughout my life. But even when I was very young, I had sort of imaginary friends that I would talk to. And now I'm like, those are probably guides, like, you know, telling me things. And I would go wandering off by myself because I wanted to just go like play by myself and like hear and experience this. But I, like you said, I had no frame of reference for what was happening. I just thought I was playing by myself and like having an imagination, which is also true. And so I think, you know, these things just sort of sought me out and found me. I did accidentally, by fate, have this really epic tarot reading that happened. And this is the story I usually tell, you know, and the short version of it is that this girl who was doing tarot readings invited a spirit to come guide the reading. And so when she did that for me, a spirit that came through was pretty immense and very dark and very powerful. And I did not have any idea that that was happening or that that could even be real or what was going on. And the tarot reading itself was very strange and dark, and it freaked her out even. And I had just watched her give like 8 other tarot readings and not get freaked out at all. So it scared me too. And I was like, well, tarot is weird. But then I was also kind of like, tarot is powerful. And like, what is this even all about? And like, maybe I could do tarot readings too. And part of that, I think, was my natural curiosity and being drawn to spiritual things, as I always had been. And part of it, I think, was also that entity like, yeah, we should work together, go do tarot readings, like call on me more and more.
Yeah.
Take me into your life deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And so every time I did a reading, I called on that same spirit.
Wow.
So it was.
Did it have it? I don't want to, you know.
Go ahead.
Did it have a name? Like was it like something that you actually like communicated with and had a like conversations?
I did not know that that's what I was doing, but yes. And so this is part of the thing I've realized also throughout my life, from when I was little and had these imaginary friends to having this spirit demonic entity to now when I work directly and intentionally with my positive light bearing spiritual allies. You know, that I've always had this stream of information and these energies and this, and, you know, communication going on. I just wasn't aware of it, and I wasn't clear about it and intentional about it. And so it's been a lifelong path of clarifying that and developing that and understanding that it's real and that that's what's happening. And so I didn't know, but yes, looking back, like every reading I did was insanely accurate, and like it would freak people out because I would just be like being basically told this is what this card means for this person, and I would just say it and I didn't know I was like being told it. I just thought it was coming to my mind, you know, like
right.
And people would kind of lose their shit, like, how did you know? And I'm like, I don't know, dude, tarot's weird.
It's the magic of the cards.
Some pretty like crazy stories I could tell of various readings too, but eventually things started happening to me that were like a poltergeist activity, and I didn't really get it because I didn't believe in that. And then I finally had to believe in it because it was too obvious, you know. I had
like stuff was happening in your home.
Things were moving in front of me and like flying out in front of me and like falling in front of me, and like I started being able to feel this very dark, very cold, you know, people describe that like getting cold when an entity is around, very cold, very dark energy, like I was being stared at. And the thing that did it for me, because I am actually a very logical, rational, skeptical person by nature, the thing that really finally cemented it was that my dog, who is the nicest, sweetest, most lovingest dog, I had literally never heard him growl in his life. I felt this energy and I'm like, someone's staring at me, but no one's here. And I got really cold and felt really dark. And then he started growling and I was like, what the fuck? Like he's like 14 at this point and he has never growled in his life. So like the confirmation that he's like sensing something, when I looked at him, he was looking right where I was feeling it coming from.
Yeah.
So I was like, something is fucking there. And I like freaked out, and that was this whole bad
How long ago was that? Can I ask how long ago that was?
I don't have a very super clear timeline in my head, but I'm pretty sure I was like 14 or 16.
Yeah. Oh, you were really young. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I was having sleep paralysis, and I had been for like a year. I didn't correlate it at the time, but it started when this entity, you know, came, maybe more than a year. And it wasn't super regular, but it was often enough that I was terrified of it. And I actually went to a sweat lodge with someone who I didn't know was a shamanic sort of individual, and it was a very out of character thing for me to do, but my sister dragged me to it. And these are the other sides of my life. Like the dark things find me, but so do the light things.
Yeah, for sure, because you're in the hole, right?
Right.
And I think that's the beauty. It's like I feel like in my spiritual, I guess, like just knowledge now, I feel like for whatever reason, whether I was primed but just the ability to see the dark, but also be able to tap in, like,
Yes.
be in the light and be able to observe the darkness. And
Yes.
that shit is
Powerful, because that darkness
so
is
powerful,
so used to, first of all, not even being observed, just like
right?
sliding in and sucking off people and directing people and them never knowing, and it's like, hey, yeah. And then
Yeah,
so like just seeing it like pisses it off. It's like, screw you, who do you think you are? And then coming at it with like, I'm light.
I'm not
The
afraid of
end.
you.
Yeah, get out. Like, you're not
Yeah,
welcome here. It's like, oh shit, like that terrifies it, and or angers it, or both.
yeah,
And it's powerful. You're right. And
it is.
I found throughout my life that, I did have to get rid of this attachment because I had invited it in. And that's a pretty strong attachment when you knowingly invite something in. And I didn't really know, but I also
Yeah,
did
you're
it.
like intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took a while, but my life plopped me down with various shamans of various traditions all around the world and various times to like give me more and more assistance in detaching, but also skills in doing that then for myself.
Hmm.
And so it was an accidental, like I never went out seeking how to learn how to do anything. It either pops into my life by chance or I get told and shown how to do it. So now, people are like, well, what are you? I'm like, I don't know what do you want to call me? Whatever
Yeah, I
you
don't feel
want.
you.
I'm a spiritual guide. I'm a shamanic, I guess, but I don't love to use that term because I have no specific tradition that gave me that title.
Right.
So I don't know what to call it. And they're like, well, what like modalities do you use? And I'm like, the ones I was given. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, how do you describe that? There's a million of them, and they came from everywhere. They came from the east and the west and the south and the north, like literally from everywhere. So it's interesting too, because the deck that I use, which I have gone back to doing tarot eventually, but for a time I didn't, because of that attachment and the negative experiences I had.
Yeah.
But I use the same deck now that I did then, because it's an awesome deck, and it actually draws also from the north, the south, the east, and the west. And I'm like, it's really the themes that kind of like come back over and over again, and you finally like stop and look back and see there was some kind of mad design here, because it all makes way too much sense. And
So intelligent.
I couldn't have planned it if I tried, like I couldn't have written this as a book if I tried. Like, this is just my soul, in command and leading me. And it goes right back to what you were saying, those experiences in the midst of them were the most terrifying things I have ever experienced. And there's some that I never shared with people because I don't want to scare people at like how terrifying it is. And that's like the darkest darkness you can find yourself in, right? But then it's just like we said too, when you find the light, even and especially in that space, now you have this like unshakable faith. Like, I know now nothing could ever convince me that I'm powerless or that any darkness could ever affect me, because I've experienced it and lived it. That even a little tiny remembrance of the light in the darkest cave flashes out all the darkness. And then that faith is unshakable. I can take that anywhere. I can do anything with it, and I can hand it to anyone who's willing to take it from me. Like, this is the truth. Like,
Yeah.
go sit with that. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's the role of any, truly spiritual guide or teacher or, practitioner, is to be able to show that to people and give that to people in a way that, just like I was able to take it from my teachers and apply it directly. And I don't like need them anymore. I hope that, we can always give this to people in a way that they don't need us anymore either.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing of like the paradigm shift of just like what people call mental illness. Like, my whole philosophy is that people are spiritually sick. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
people that have these like attachments to them that they have zero idea. There's people that purposely work with them.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, same, when I work with people, I show them, I guess, through my experiences and the modalities that I use, is that we all have that inner divineness and that we all have that light inside of us. And just to
Absolutely.
teach that to somebody and to allow them to like create more sacred space within themselves, so they're able to look at their trauma, they're able to look at their fear, and they don't retract or feel like it's coming up too affirm that they're bad or they're dark. It's coming up to shine your light at that and to be able to understand, like, we all have the capability, I think, like, we all have that within us because we're the whole, you know?
Yeah.
And, um,
Which isn't to say that people should feel like they have to like go diving into that or seeking it or whatever, because that's
you can
also
be
like,
as logical as you
yeah,
want too. You don't,
totally,
yeah, I don't feel, well, that's another thing I like to tell people is like, you can get as spiritual as you want. You can have crystals all around your bed. You can, you can tattoo, the chakra system all over your body, starting from the ground and going down the root.
yeah.
If that's what you need, cool. Just make sure it's like authentic for you and you're not following some sort of spiritual recipe of like, oh, well, I saw this, whatever. Because I've always been, it's like you're your own guru, period. There's nobody, like, I cannot heal you, but I can tap into a higher level, like my high self, and my high self can connect with your high self, and they know how to bring in all of that light. And so you're just basically like a
Conduit.
facilitator, a conduit, a channel, a facilitate, whatever it is you want to call it. And I that to me is really powerful because experiencing that darkness, like for people that haven't experienced that, they're like, for people that have, they're like, they get it how powerful and how fucked up and how dark and terrifying like that is. And I've, like that was living in my home growing up as a child, and like my parents were affected by it and I was affected by it. And then when I was older, to have it like personally like attack me. And so that too though has changed, like for my spiritual progression. Like I was saying, like I didn't ever want to mess around with tarot. I never played with Ouija boards. I didn't, I think I had like this really cool, it's actually a really neat book, this old book that I got from a thrift store, and it was like an alphabet witchcraft book, something. It was really old. I had it in my room as a teenager just because I liked old books. My dad walked in and saw that, and he was just like, "Get that the fuck out of my house." And so I was like, "Okay," but and I never like identified as like a witch or Wiccan or any of that. I just, if there was a group, I did not belong to it. So I didn't ever like put myself in some sort of like category. But like you said, things showed up in my life. And I think I was really like shown that I could heal, like learn how to heal myself, or I could just continue to suffer and just be this victim of the trauma that I experienced and just keep, kind of trudging. And it's not like that decision made everything magically work out. I mean, there was so much pain through that, but it just let in more light and more light and more light. And that faith, like you said, it's like once you realize that that's inside you and it didn't come from someone telling you, it didn't come from a shaman giving it to you, it literally was activated inside of you, and that you can access that. It's just, that shit is palpable, and it's so expansive. And I think that's how we heal ourselves and each other, is the more we resonate with that light within inside of us and shine it out and just be like, oh, the sun just came out like right when
Yay!
I know, just for a second, it's such a magical moment when the sun comes out here. We're like, oh, but it's infectious, and we have no idea, like you said, we cannot write a book of how that affects people on so many levels of their spirit, their consciousness, of just interacting with somebody with your true authentic light shining out. I think that is so healing, because it's like when you said, it's like really seeing somebody really truly connecting, and we thrive on that. And I don't want to get into like all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, but I just want to reach out. And I struggle with having compassion for people of the fear that they're on.
Me too.
It's really easy for me to be a shithead and fall into some sort of like, soapbox of judgment. But my heart self, when I'm really tapped in, I do have compassion, and it actually like hurts my heart on a level, that, but again, like, I feel like the only thing that I can do, like when I truly get down to the base of it, is tap into my own light and shine that out as much as I can, and that is really what makes, I guess, the magic be able to flow through of like
Yeah.
being able to really see all of the beauty and all of the gifts that we really have and connect with really cool people like you. And such an like you are, it's really bizarre. It's like she's really gonna think I'm some sort of a stalker because we have a lot of
No, it's weird.
similar
Yeah.
experiences.
It is.
You
It's like the
know?
same. We have like a slightly different orientation to
Mhm.
it just because people have personalities, but we have
Yeah,
almost like the exact same sort of
yeah,
path. It's really affirming though too, to see like, okay, cool. Like it's not and this is part of why I love to share any part of my story, however dark or however like screwed up or however light and beautiful, because there's people out there who are wondering like, is this okay? Or like, am I normal? Or like
yeah,
what, I do what I call kind of guidance sessions. And it's like a talk therapy session. Like we're gonna
yeah,
chat it out. And that's the majority of what people want to do is say, like, here's what happened to me. Is it normal? And like, am I looking at it correctly? And what should I do with it? And
yeah.
it's like we all need that. We all need like validation and affirmation that this is actually happening, it's actually real, and you are normal and it is healthy. And like, here's how you could look at it. And it's just we all need that. And like you said, when we're shining our light in that way or anyway, like I'm about to after this go do what I call like a ceremony and session. And when that's I go into ceremony for people, and I exactly what you said, I'm not actually even doing anything except helping, like being present and like helping sort of direct and bring back like whatever messages I can. But it's really like their higher self and allies and my higher self and allies, and they're the ones like doing the work on the
Yeah.
spiritual level. But profound healing comes through when you can go there and be present for that. And it's the same thing, when we can bring and access that light for people. When I come back then and I'm able to share, like, here's the messages and here's what happened, that affirmation for people, like, oh, I am seen on the spiritual level. Even my spiritual highest self and my allies, like, no, and they're like here with me, and they've never been anywhere but right here. Now for the rest of your life, like, you can't deny that you have that going on, and that light exists, and that all of those allies exist, and all of that love surrounds you, because as much as we can talk about these demonic entities and these sorts of things going on, they're actually much more rare than all of the like ancestors and like spiritual allies and light and love of like heaven or God or whatever you call stuff, all
Yeah.
around you all the time. That's real and that's there. And then you like deeply cement that in yourself, and people need to hear and feel and experience all of those things. And when that ripples out, it's not just that person who's receiving that and seeing that reflection of their own light and really understanding the light that's inside of them, but it's every person in every moment from there on that gets
They come
that
in
little
contact
boost.
with. Yeah.
Yes. Because whether you're empathic and it's happening or not, like you said, we're porous, we're
Yeah.
absorbing and we're exchanging information on every level. And that goes on forever. So like, it's anyone out there listening, like anything you do that is giving yourself love or, affirmation or access to your own inner truth and light, you're saving yourself, but you're also saving the world.
You are. I totally agree with that. It's so cool. I think we should do man, yeah, it's funny. I'm gonna do a sound session right after this too. So
Awesome.
even our schedules are the same.
Wow. That's so cool.
It is cool, but I would love to have you back and do, now that we've like really feel like kind of gotten to know each other and stuff, got to share
Yeah.
stories, but do all like on modalities,
That'd
different
be
healing
rad.
modalities. It would be really cool because, again, I have a hard time sort of being like, oh, I'm this, I identify as this, but because it's
It's
always
hard.
changing. But all the things that I've learned, I utilize all of those things. And
Yes.
that's what I try to teach people is just you're learning all of these tools and it doesn't, whatever resonates with you at the time and whatever speaks to you, follow that. And then you can access it and you can learn how to absorb it and have it work for you in a way that is your own.
Absolutely.
And I
That's
think
absolutely
that's
right.
really true power. So,
Yes. It's so true. It's so true. It's so individual, and everybody has their ways and reflects in different ways and grabs different tools. And I I really want to have you on Rogue Ways too. I know we have that scheduled, and it'd be cool to just sort of do like this in reverse and have me be able to ask you all the questions about your path that is very similar to my own, but I'm sure that'll be really cool coming up soon too.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. This is fun. I feel, I just did a podcast with Cheney, and we talked about you, and she was like, I was just like, man, and me and her both, I do really feel like, the more healing that I am doing in my life, I'm meeting all these really kick-ass, powerful, humble, spiritual women. And that's so healing for me. And I didn't get to say it on the podcast I did with Cheney, but it's like I didn't have a great experience with women and girls for a long time, a lot of trauma.
Me either.
Yeah. And I really understand, like, that was a frequency that I was resonating on and attracting those kinds of experiences to kind of affirm that trauma, that it was correct, and that all
true,
and I get that, but I also I want to just take a moment to appreciate that the more healing I do, I really do come across like not just women either, because men are beautiful too, but it's very healing for me to be able to connect with my heart, like with a woman. I'm like, it's so healing, it's got this like beautiful energy. So
I totally appreciate that, because I have the same, past with women and the same exact experience, coming out more and more into like my truest self. So I'm glad you said that, because it helps me really remember how grateful I am for that exact same thing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's awesome.
I have an offer for any listeners if anybody wants to use it, if I can share that.
Yes, I want you to share anything, like how people can find you, anything that you want to put out there. I'd love it.
Thank you. I have so many things that I do and going on, so I'll just direct people to rogueways.org. And you'll see the things I write. I write articles and poetry. I have novels that I've written that are about, the sort of ages, the sine curve of the ages movement and humanity's movement through those ages, and our sort of like reach up to the height of the golden ages, and then our drop down into the trenches of the dark ages, and sort of like why, that might happen, and the spiritual lessons and battles with dark entities along the way. So super fun fictional novels. If people are into that, they can grab those. I create
Crystal. Are those only on your website? I don't mean to interrupt, but are your books only on your website, or are they available everywhere?
They're available on Amazon at least, and I don't know if anywhere else carries. I don't think so, but you can grab them on Amazon, and my pen name is Corey Scharmyn, which is Quorri. Scharmyn, if you want to Scharmyn, which of course has to be like the worst spelling ever for anyone to remember. But if you want to grab them on Amazon, but if you go to rogueways.org, I link to them on Amazon, but I also sell them directly. If you want an inscription and a signature from me, then I give a little note, along with people. And I usually throw in like a little gift too. So, you can get them from me directly on the site as well. And then I do crystal and stone and organite jewelry and pendants and art. And those are all not only already channeling their own powerful energies and holding their own powerful energetic signatures, but I also add a blessing, a spiritual blessing for people. So when you receive it, you can sort of tell it your intention for that blessing, and then it like activates that for you. I do blessings for people. For now, they're still free, and hopefully will be for as many. It's a complicated subject, but anyways, I do offer blessings. And then I do like what I said, the guidance sessions and the ceremony sessions, if that's something, if people feel like they're facing like a darker entity or pattern in their life, then that's often really good for those sorts of healings. And most of all, for free, people can go to Rogue Ways on YouTube or on any podcast app, and now on Rockfin as well. And I would love to have people come chill. But anything in the shop on rogueways.org for your listeners, if they want to grab anything except the t-shirts and stuff, because that's a third party that I don't have control over the pricing of, but everything I offer, consultations, sessions, jewelry, all that stuff is 15% off if you want to use the Consciousness on Tap coupon code.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so
I got a coupon. You're my first coupon.
Woo!
All right.
So
I'm
I
making
just,
it.
and also you can contact me there and just like let me know, hey, what's up or whatever. And there's just, yeah, all of those things I'd like to invite people to. So
Yeah, for sure.
and I really want to invite them for your episode on Rogue Ways, which what did we say?
It's like the 26th, but I don't know. All the dates, we did so many dates for just trying to get this and stuff.
Yeah.
So confused. I'm like, well, I don't know.
Oh, I think you're on the 16th.
Oh, 16th. Okay.
Yes. So
It's
if
just
people want to come, it's a
not on a
Sunday.
Saturday. Sunday. Okay. Sunday.
Yes. And it'll be at, yeah, on the channel live. So if people want to check it out, it's 7 p.m. Mountain. So that'll be really fun.
That's going to be awesome. Yes. I'm super excited about that. This has been really cool. This is going to be on Rockfin Conscious on Tap. So yeah, I can't thank you enough. It was really fun, and we'll be in contact. If ever you want to, reach out before the 16th, go for it. I'd love to have you back and really do one on modalities. I think that would be super cool. So
That would be super fun.
Yeah, maybe it's just like, are you on Instagram by chance?
I am, but I never use it anymore.
You never use it.
Yeah, because they did that thing where they're like, we own your whole life. And I was like, fuck you. But I also realized like they already owned everything before that. They're just telling us now. So it was kind of stupid to rebel against it. But I just haven't got back into it since I rebelled. So it's there. I just don't use it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if like maybe like beside, because like I'm like, oh, I gotta go check my email. And that's just like maybe like I just usually message people on Instagram, but we just stick with email. That's totally cool.
Yeah.
I would really love to have you back and schedule you sometime to come back and just talk about modalities and
That'd be rad. I love to share those tools with people because, I always had like this thing that was so weird of even like charging people money for any of the things I do. But I really, my higher self and my guides and whoever were like, you have to, like, you can't just like give yourself away because it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of time. And I think it's very fairly priced, by the way, compared to what I've had to pay for my ceremonies with other healers.
Yeah.
It's very fairly priced, but it just still was this like thing I had to like get over, like, yeah, you can charge people money. It's okay. And, like chill out.
I think it's really deep that a lot of like spiritual workers or energy workers, like I should say authentic ones, keep in mind because it is weird to ask for a payment after having this deep spiritual experience with somebody and be like, okay, you owe me, and then let me get my phone out, and then what's your credit card number, to do all like the logistics of like money.
All the
like,
shallow shit. Yeah.
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 It is challenging. I 100% can agree with that. And I have the same experience. I had the lady that we do trade of where I get to have like my sound studio and do all my energy work there. But she's the one, she's like, you need to raise your prices. You have like 3-hour sessions with people. Because I do a lot of spiritual counseling. I do like SRT, spiritual response therapy. But a lot of it, it's like when you get into this, I'm passionate. I don't look at a clock. I'm not like, okay, we have a time from like
time's up, get out. Yeah.
So I'm just like, I guess. And then, one of the things I've been doing with people lately, which is really amazing, is doing like plant medicine, like shroom ceremonies with people with sound. And that,
that's awesome.
That's amazing. Like that was just like a pipe dream that I was talking about last year, of being like, I wish I could, I really like, my heart really wants to do this. And, I just feel like the more healing and the more trauma that we let go of, like just this whole experience unfolds and like our real desires, our heart self desires, like come into fruition
they just come
easily.
Together. It's true.
And you're like, what the hell? It's crazy. I went from like wishing to just doing in a very short period of time, and just really being able to show up for yourself and for others and feel good in it, instead of being like, I'm a fraud.
Yes. Yeah. Like, well, it for a while I was just doing things for free, because, or for very, very cheap, even once I did start charging because of that exact thing. Like, am I a fraud? Is this all just bullshit? Like, am I just like taking people's money and doing nothing and having like imagination sessions? And then I'm like, oh no, that is actually, I am actually having imagination sessions, but it's like, that is actually part of the power of it. And, you know, when you get confirmation after confirmation after confirmation from the people you're working with who are like, oh my God, how did you know? Or, oh my God, this is like something shifted, or like,
Yeah.
wow, I really needed that. Or like, thank you. You're like, okay, I need to stop doubting myself. Because after a while, at first, it kind of makes sense. You like doubt, you get questioned, you gather evidence, like that's cool. But if you keep doing that and you keep underselling yourself and you keep telling yourself you're a fraud, like now that's going to become your truth, and it's going to block you up, and you're not going to be able to help people. So that's another thing, you know, I think any true practitioner kind of goes through that stage of like there's a name for it. What do they call it? The imposter syndrome.
Oh, imposter syndrome. I think it also attracts like those lower, you know, frequency beings, and they'll like
Yes.
feed off that
They're like,
doubt
yeah,
and
you're a
fear.
fraud. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And we're going to show you why you're a fraud. And yeah, it
Right.
really does. Yeah, you really got to just like harness that light and just
Which we
have,
can talk about all that in addition to the
yeah,
modalities of like the process of like learning to trust yourself and open your own spiritual channels and
yeah.
be in your own spiritual truth and live that truth. But yeah, it's been a really, really awesome you know, first episode, and so I look forward to future episodes with you.
Yeah, me too. Well, okay, cool. We got all, I'm gonna just stop recording. I'll cut all this out. It's always me like trying to find
the buttons.
oh no, not that video. Where's the yes. The thing is